Welcome to Jazz Zone Together, our online jazz community where we can provide jazz education resources, interviews with jazz educators, artists, and celebrities, along with valuable tips and repertoire suggestions. Today, we're thrilled to welcome to the Jazz Zone Together one of the most highly acclaimed and in-demand trumpet players in the world, Ingrid Jensen. Ingrid currently serves as Dean of Jazz Arts and jazz trumpet teacher at the Manhattan School of Music. Now I'll bring in Dick Dunscomb to conduct the interview with Ingrid. Dick, take it away.
Thank you, Bob. Oh, this is going to be fun. Ingrid, not only you're one of my favorite trumpet players, but you're also one of the busiest people in the world today, which we'll get into a little bit later. But for the time being, welcome to Jazz Zone Together.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
All right. Well, let's start at the beginning. Where did you get bit by the music bug, and how did it lead you on the path you're on today?
Well, many, many years ago, when I was a baby, my mom, who loved the piano and played classical piano mostly, but who discovered stride and Nat King Cole and Louis Armstrong when she was at the University of British Columbia studying to be a grade school teacher. She kind of fell in love with the music, and so when I was very, very young, she said she used to put on Louis Armstrong records to make me stop crying. So I guess that was probably a sign right there. She's like, it was so interesting. I'd put these records on and you would just stop crying. Yeah, and then, from then on, it's just a process. We had a very musical family. My mom, of course, playing piano all the time. My older sister picked up the trombone, which I kind of wanted because I wanted to be Jack Teagarden. That was the sound in my head. It's kind of the nerd that I was from back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. I just wanted to play the trombone. But my older sister got it first, and we didn't get along very well. So my parents were quite diplomatic in saying no and pick another instrument. So I made my best friend play the trombone, and she got really good. and I ended up with the trumpet. And so then the rest was, just a year-to-year process of trying not to quit because I found it so challenging being left-handed and playing on a right-handed instrument. I actually was playing left-handed for the first few months until the band teacher, who was very green, realized, oh, I think you're supposed to use the other hand. I think you're supposed to use your right hand to do the buttons. So then that was a bit of a reset for me because I was playing so much by ear and just finding things very easily. So that, slowed down the enjoyment of it a little bit. And then nevertheless, stuck with it. We had a lot of great band programs in our schools. And we especially had a community band, which you may have heard of Diana Krall. She also was part of this community band, and it was called the Nanaimo Musicians Association Big Band. And we were very lucky to have it. My sister went through it. She played Barry and then alto. I went through it and started on fourth trumpet, ended up playing some second. And there was always this really great lead player, this guy named Al Campbell, I think he was in his 70s when I started in the band. And all these kind of, Nanaimo had this very strong, somehow, for some reason, there was a brass band, kind of a brass band scene there because of the coal mines in the town I came from. And those brass bands fed a lot of trumpet players into the system, and trombone and, brass. And so we had this great big band, and it was a swing band, and we would play dances on the weekends. And all the money from the dances would go towards buying big band music like Rob McConnell charts and Brad Jones and all this really hip music. And so we would rehearse on the Wednesdays. We didn't rehearse the dance music unless we really kind of tanked on it at the dance the week before. And so then the band was playing more challenging music, and then we'd play dances on the weekends. And there were a lot of gigs. I probably did like 30 gigs a year sometimes with that band, and I was only in like 10th grade when I started. So that's where I really cut my teeth, being able to play with a lot of older people who have been playing the music a lot longer than me and really swinging it, like not just half swinging, but fully swinging to the point of making people dance. Yeah, and so that was an amazing part of my childhood and my upbringing, was playing in that band through high school, and then I went to community college in the same town, so I kept playing in that band and doing my own gigs and playing on the mainland. I had to take a boat from where I grew up. I grew up on an island. Took a ferry boat over to the mainland and would hear a lot of music. Heard Freddie Hubbard and or heard Tom Harrell, all these people at the local clubs in Vancouver and at some of the theaters there. And then eventually I went through this 2 years of college, and I did a summer camp called the Bud Shank Workshop. Do you guys know who Bud Shank is?
Sure.
Bud was a really important person in my life. He really kind of supported me when I got to the camp as a youngster, but also, eventually hired me as faculty there and had me come and play one of my first big gigs at that festival. And so I went to that summer camp, and it was one of those turning points where, I just met a lot of people. I met Tom Harrell, I met Bobby Shue, I met Bob Brookmeyer, the whole Hal Galper quintet, who kind of encouraged me. They were very good mentors to me. They said, young lady, it's really nice out here on the West Coast. It's really pretty, but you do know you got to go east and get yourself challenged a little bit more by the scene back east. And I was like, what does that mean? And then my friends explained to me, there's this place called New York, and there's another place called Boston. And so I actually went to Boston, and I had quite a bit of scholarship money. Well, maybe not a lot, but I had maybe a 30% scholarship, and I got there, and they were able to give me more because there weren't a lot of trumpet players, especially people playing on the level I was playing. So I was able to get a lot of scholarship to get me through school, and some grants, and did work study, and played in Latin bands and salsa bands, and learned, a lot of new cultural relationships that the trumpet has, right? From the merengue tradition to just playing straight ahead, really heavy duty. And then playing in big band. I was in Herb Pomeroy's line rating band and the Art Blakey Ensemble, and I toured a lot with the Berkeley All-Stars. And then I graduated. And when I graduated, I moved to Copenhagen and spent a couple of months just holed up in my aunt's apartment and transcribed a lot, hours, like 10 hours a day sometimes. And then I'd go out to jam sessions and try out all these tunes I'd been transcribing and practicing and just kind of decompressing from so many years of school. And and then that was where I met the great Ernie Wilkins, who you may know. Ernie and I became very good friends. And Ernie, I'd hang out with Ernie all the time. We'd listen to records, and he kind of had me play in his big band a few times, and then connected me with other musicians in Copenhagen. And I almost thought I was going to settle there. But then I somehow ended up back in New York. I think it was through a bad ex-boyfriend relationship. He was my boyfriend when I landed in New York, and then an hour later he was my ex. So, so that didn't work out so well.
That wasn't a long relationship.
No, it was like an ex it was a boyfriend from Berkeley who was sent me a letter and said, I miss you. And then by the time I landed in New York, he was like, I don't miss you anymore. Found someone new. By the way, you can't stay at my place. So
that's probably a good thing in the long run.
He did actually stay at his place. He stayed at his girlfriend's house, and I cleaned his nasty apartment. It was so gross. And then I was able to get a day job working so I could make some money and pay rent and couch surfing through a bunch of people's houses. And that was the year I started playing a bit with, there was an all-woman dance band called the Kit McClure Band. And this is before Diva was formed. And so I played with that band, and I met this trumpet player, Rebecca Franks, if you know her. And she said, you should go get lessons with Laurie Frank. And that was the first time someone had told me to get lessons, like real trumpet lessons. And also it was the first time I ever studied with a woman trumpet teacher. So it was a kind of like, whoa, big experience. And she, of course, was an incredible teacher. And that was I think it was about 22 at the time, maybe 21. And I was able to get so much technique from her in such a short amount of time because I wasn't in school. I was able to practice everything she told me to practice, and I just did it exactly the way she said. And instantly had register and range and endurance and freedom through the horn that I didn't have before. And so that was just an amazing time.
Hmm. And was that a lead into the diva experience?
I mean, probably. I think there was probably some kind of common threads there where people, one person knew another. Rebecca knew me and recommended
Hmm.
the band, and I believe I'm blurring my dates here, but I think I'd started playing with the band when I moved to Europe. So I got a job teaching in Austria. It started in '91, maybe with Diva, and then I moved to Europe for a while, and I just kept coming back because it was so cheap to fly back and forth. And when I was
Well, before you go on, let's talk a little bit about this experience that you had over in Europe and how you got hooked up with the Bruckner Conservatory.
that was through a gig I got with the Vienna Art Orchestra. It was a project with 7 men and 7 women called the Fee and Males Project. And we toured all over the place, and I was able to meet some people in Europe, and especially one director of a program, and they were looking for a trumpet teacher. And he said, "Oh, why don't you come and audition?" So I'd flown back to New York, and tickets were cheap, and they're like, "We'll give you $1,000 to fly over and audition." I was like, "Wow, I can get a ticket for $300. That means I'll make $700." I was very good at math, as you can tell, and so that was kind of what got me to move to Austria.
And what was that experience like, becoming a teacher?
Um, Very interesting, actually. I was a very curious teacher. I wanted to see how I could try some of these techniques Lori had shown me, as well as all the things I had learned over the years from other teachers. I wanted to figure out how to put those in place with other students, as each student was so different, right? So I had some students that played really tight, and others who were just, everyone had their own things that they needed repaired, and I was able to see how I could help them in such a small amount of time with really basic fundamentals.
That's an interesting topic to me because you obviously will get to your Manhattan School experience a little bit later, but you performed with numerous big bands also, including Maria Schneider and others. Share
Mhm.
with us some of those highlights.
Well, I mean, that was over 10 years of maybe 15 years I played with Maria. So there's a lot of highlights in there. It's an amazing
Mhm.
experience. And also playing with Diva up to that point. At one point, I had to kind of make a choice between my very busy career, because the reason I moved back after living in Austria was because I got a record deal. And to,
Mhm.
to have this record deal, I really needed to be in New York. And that was with the Enja record company. And I had my own bands, and it was a very exciting time for me. I was in the studio, and it was all paid for, and I was playing with really great musicians. So those 3 records I did were also getting me more into my own leadership roles and touring more. So around that time, I think around the time of the second record, I had to make a choice between Maria's band and Diva, and many other things. I was very lucky, able to say no to, doing club dates, which I didn't really enjoy doing. Um, or playing, just playing gigs that made me feel a little less of a musician than I thought, kind of think I am. I think we all are. Sometimes you got to pay the rent, though. And if you're with a good club date band, it's a different thing. But I was, freelancing with these different groups, and it was
Mhm.
quite.
So what was the choice that you made
I mean,
between Maria and Diva?
it was a natural choice to start touring more with Maria, because I felt that her music was more in the more of a contemporary
Mhm.
place for me, that fit my voice, was more of individual voice in there, as much as Diva was too. It's just a different, it's a different style of theme and variation. Some people call it improvisation, but I call it theme and variation with Black American music fused with classical elements.
That's a good description.
Interesting.
Also, you performed and recorded with a lot of renowned artists as you begin to talk about your first recording. A lot of our listeners are aspiring jazz musicians and teachers and professional artists, and they like to hear what does it take to get into that process and be successful.
The process of what, being a leader and recording your own music?
Recording, let's go with that first. going into the studio?
Yeah, it's like we're in a different phase now than when I was coming up in the 90s. When I had a record deal, there really was, you go in the studio with your band, and sometimes you've rehearsed, sometimes you're just hitting cold, and then you go on tour. So I think that the time that we're in now with all this technology around us, I could record in my basement. I could do a record here if I wanted. I could do just one tune and maybe remix it. So I think that the ease of where we are at with recording now is, it's kind of fluid, and everyone really needs to make sure that they have their voice together, whatever that means, voice together, that you have your instrument together, your music, your concept. So you're not exactly coming into the studio, the recording situation with a muted version of what it is you'd like to say. So to get to that place of freedom of expression and just it feeling natural and good, not that it's going to feel great every time, but knowing that what you're putting down is a representation of you, I think is a good starting point, rather than trying to do a record that's a tribute to Clark Terry and then playing like Clark Terry, for example. Clark Terry was my mentor, and he did not want me to play like Clark Terry. Really, really, and this is my message to the young people, and especially people who want to record, is like, he got the most excited when I sat in and I played my own material. I was really finding my own sound and my own direction through the chords, and I was really truly improvising with a theme and variation mentality versus playing licks or playing things I transcribed, although those things were very important. So going through that process of listening a lot and playing a lot and writing a lot and talking about the music with each other, and then of course hours of either playing along with records or writing your own melodies over chords, changes and progressions. That's a process. I just don't think that we can skip over that and just record.
So today, musicians that are wanting to break in, so to speak, are sometimes a little bit unprepared. Say, for example, their sight reading is not up to par, and that's a breaker.
That's a deal breaker too.
What other things like that do they need to be aware of?
Well, I think that the sight reading also relates to being able to read and interpret and interpolate immediately the song. If you see a blues or you see a rhythm changes, and it happens to be an F sharp or G in a foreign key, it's not like, oh, geez, I don't know what to do. So that's sort of a red flag too. It's like, if you can't even read the chords and hear the progression by seeing the way that the movement of the harmony is revealing itself to you, then reading the melody is also going to be equally a drag. So that's why the playing in the big band is so great. Playing a third trumpet part and learning how to blend and going, oh wow, what is this note? Oh, it sounds like it's the root. Oh, it's the sharp 9. Oh, it's a third. Not being that analytical in the moment, but really having an understanding of what your role is. Because it is truly a democratic type of music where we all have to meet in the middle and play it at the best from the weakest person in the room, not from the strongest. It's like everyone needs to have their skills and to be having good rhythm and to have checked out their pitch center on their instrument. I mean, basic stuff as much as also really being able to read. And my friend Allison Miller was saying, I had a teacher once who told me I should just read 10 minutes every day. So I did. I can read anything. I'm like, that sounds logical. Every day you sight read something new for 10 minutes, whatever that might be, right? Could be a bass part, could be a concerto, it could be a biche etude, it could be, whatever that is. Definitely some big band parts, right? Some lead trumpet, some third trumpet. Could be a lead sheet in concert and then you transpose it. Or you play it in a different meter. That's another problem with our real book. It's put out and there's like it's all quarter notes, and it's like, well, interpret that. Can you guys hear that in the rooms?
Sure.
It's just like, where's your sense of adventure? Because to me, this music is a very curious music. You need to have a sense of curiosity, but within that curiosity, you also have to have a ton of technique, as you both know. As everyone who's had experience playing knows, you don't want to be thinking about which button to put down and trying to use your foot to try to tell you where beat one is. It's too late at that point.
There's a lot of emphasis today in the schools that is put on teaching jazz. Some good, some other. And I know that you're in a wonderful place. The Manhattan School of Music is one of the top in the country. How did that come about?
That came about through my predecessor, Stefan Harris, and he brought in some new trumpet faculty. He felt that there was a need for some change in our department, and so he brought in John Faddis, myself, and Scott Wenholt, who's already there. And between the three of us, we have like a really nice arc of personalities to share trumpet education with our students.
Yeah, that's a good trio. You know, now you're an administrator.
A little bit. I should probably be doing some emails. Don't remind me. I probably have 1,000 emails to check before I go back to work tomorrow. That is part of the gig, and it's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life because it's so outside of what I set out to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I set out to just play music and be a free spirit. So the balance between that in my brain is teaching me about my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And about our brains, you know, and how potentially enormous the space of functioning can be if we don't limit ourselves to just one thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for me, it was during COVID I took over, so that was crazy, right? I took over running a music department in the height of COVID. So not only did I know nothing about the job and what I was doing, we were restructuring every second. Like basically, as my friend Henry put it, he goes, we were just building the airplane as it was flying. Just chucking parts here and there to see if it'll keep going. So now this is like kind of the calm after the storm, but at the same time, I also am I'm really learning about limits in my life, like how much I can really stretch myself. I'm also a mom. I have an 11-year-old daughter who's really cool and deserves my full attention, and an amazing husband, and my sister who lives in Rochester now. So, and her niece. So we have a really tight little family web here. So I try not to just be the one who's never around.
That's a wonderful family. I'm so pleased that you have that. And you know, I think it comes through in your playing too, because it's you're at peace when you play, it sounds like.
Thank you. That's the goal. That really is. And believe it or not, I tell my students, and they still don't totally fully believe me. I'm like, this should be fun. And believe it or not, the trumpet is easy. If you don't get in your way, it's actually really easy. So I'm just brainwashing them basically.
Well, I understand that.
But I just feel like, you know, I don't know if we should, especially at this point in our evolution since this huge lockdown, I don't think we should be beating ourselves up for things that are not perfect yet. I think it's a really good time to reflect on the joy of the moment when it's time to play, and that's clearly evident when I play with my group, or when I play with Artemis, or different, you know, I see my students play. I played with my faculty the other day. I mean, it's like, whoa, we were like locked up for 3 years, and now we're on stage playing music together. Something went wrong. Oh well, let's use our tools to recover. Versus, oh no, like what a waste of energy, right? To go to the dark side, because then you got to come back. So not to sound like it's all, you know, bubbles and balloons and unicorns, but it's really you know, the harder we work and the deeper we discover how to play the chunk of metal, and then how to also converse in the moment with one another. I think the more, and without words, right? Although I wrote lyrics this morning, I'm very proud of myself.
Oh, right.
I was reading this Rumi poem, and I started writing lyrics for a song I wrote for Wayne Shorter, and it just came out, and we'll see how it goes.
That's great. Yeah. So you're an educator and a performer, and as an educator, you've been involved in several of these jazz institute including the Dave Brubeck Institute, Thelonious Monk, and so forth. How important are those opportunities for developing jazz performers and students?
Oh, those are all very important ones. Yeah. They're all places where a high level of students has been chosen, some who come from places of no equity whatsoever, and others who are fully funded. And I just think that that's one of the most important things in this particular music is that there's nothing really elitist about it. It can be that way in certain tiny corners of the scene, but I think it's just a really basic human communication system that I always like to say if aliens dropped in out of space and were watching what we did in a rehearsal, I'd be like, that's awesome. The way you guys are communicating without even talking, like no words or anything. That's it. That's the idea. If they were peaceful aliens, right? We're going to assume they're peaceful aliens. So to bring young people together, but also be with my peers a lot of times, we also realize that we're trying to nurture something that is the opposite of all the toxic poison that goes on in our world with so many other decisions made for the wrong reasons, for the wrong outcome. Our real direction is to be good citizens and to communicate.
Very important. And, a lot of, as I said, jazz educators are watching these videos. And I know that you were involved at one point with IAJE, and now that organization of GEN has become very prominent. I feel like it's important for the educators to attend those. There's so much that they can gain out of that. Do you agree?
I do. Didn't have the greatest time at the last one, but that's just me. I felt like there was a little bit of, I don't know, maybe some politics going on. I don't know what was going on, but I just felt like my group really was not even acknowledged. I brought students from South Africa.
Wow.
It was kind of a big deal. So I'm still recovering from the last gen, and we'll see what happens there. At the same time, I do agree it's important for us all to come together and talk about what we do. It's more important for the students to meet one another from different places.
Right.
There are some amazing teachers doing amazing work out there for sure.
Exactly. I know a little bit about, is it the same program in South Africa that Darius Brubeck?
No, this is called the Masekela Institute. We have a donor at MSM, which I'm hoping we can keep this program going, but I think it might be towards the end of it. But we have 6 students, and I brought 6 of them, and then we had a bass player from our classical department who plays great jazz, and we had a couple of our own. We had a Canadian tenor player and a trumpet player from Florida, so it was a real, UN of music making situation, and they're just. The energy that these students bring is something beyond what any school I've ever been at can have. It's a true luxury, and it's a luxury for everybody.
Well, you have certainly shared some wonderful information with us today, and I'm appreciative for that. So I have one more request, if you could. Would you play something for us, please?
Time I'll have my horn.
It's a beautiful sound. Thank you so much.
We
really appreciate it.
I really
you are the best, and we really love you. Thank you.
You guys are beautiful. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Bob. Thanks everybody out there, and just practice. Keep your horn on your face, enjoy music, and keep going.
Thank you so much, Ingrid.
Thank you.
To our viewers, thanks for joining us for this Jazz Zone Together interview. please check out the entire library of interviews. We know you'll find them of real value to your program. Watch for updates as we're adding new interviews regularly.